Hello, and welcome to Royale Without Cheese, our bi-weekly podcast in which we discuss both the classic and the unknown of art and popular cinema from the then and now. We are your hosts, me, Leonardo Miranda, and Tomás Ferreira.
Hey, hey, hey.
So today we talk about Ran, but before any ados, don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, or simply give us a like. Ran is a 1985 epic drama film directed and co-written by Akira Kurosawa. The plot derives from Shakespeare's King Lear and includes segments based on legends of the Japanese Sengoku period. The film follows an aging warlord who decides to abdicate as ruler in favor of his three sons. As Kurosawa's last epic, Ran has often been cited as among his finest achievements and is widely regarded as one of the greatest films ever made, not to mention the most expensive in Japanese cinema upon its release. Very well, a true tale of epic proportions, but was RWC as enchanted with its visage of blood and greed in feudal Japan? Let's slice in.
Exactamundo, let's slice in. So here we go. Like we said, Mike is not with us, but that won't prevent RWC to kick in the
Mike.
diesel, or should I say the horses, and cut through the fields, right? So going around with the puns. This was about the third time I watched this movie because we had planned this review
True.
in a while. But this is one of my, well, it's one of my favorites from Kurosawa simply because it's so unique, in its grand colors, wide color palettes, and tale. I think it's kind of this very, it's the sort of tale that is deeply rooted in kind of human, well, storytelling. Stories about family and the dynamics of family in this kind of bigger, wider plane.
Yeah, it's a film that so obviously it's like amazing, but there's something about it that I'm always, at least because I watched it twice, and I think the second time I did enjoy it a bit more. But I think it's just my tolerance for historical epics is still not
Yeah, specifically war movies.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. It's not very.
Leo does not like or
It's
appreciate
not that I
war
don't like.
movies.
It's just that
Yeah.
they're at a disadvantage with me because I'm more. It's a bit harder for me to be captivated by that sort of film. I don't know why. It just doesn't fully do it for me. But it's an incredible film, and the narrative. I had read King Lear before. Like at the time we were going to talk about it, I still had it in mind a little bit. So I think when I first watched it, I was a little disappointed that it was like three sons instead of three daughters.
Right.
Because when I went to watch Ran, I was like, oh, he's gonna do like three daughters in this context. It's like interesting, and then okay, no, he switched.
Yeah.
But it makes sense. I understand why. I don't think it would make sense to make three daughters in that context, but it's just something that I really enjoyed about Shakespeare's play, like the relationship between the father and the daughters, which inevitably changes when it's a father-son dynamic. But it's fascinating, and I love the opening, like around 20 minutes of the establishment of the ideas and the themes and the narrative that's going to take place. Especially I love the third son, Saburo, and his just unwillingness to kiss his ass, which is the most, I just love that, and immediately establishes the central problem of this king who wants to be treated as a king, but like that's ultimately his downfall in certain ways, is because he's more interested in the treatment of a king instead of being told the truth. And so he banishes the two people who are being honest with him and are telling them and are treating him as someone that would be his equal. And it's also interesting that as the film progresses, Kurosawa focuses more and more on the fact that this guy really did horrible stuff, which would be inevitable. He's a warlord. And so he doesn't run away from that. He's supposedly like our hero in certain ways, but he's a horrible person. And essentially what's going on is his past and the things that he did are catching up with him. And it's like a god or just karma in general is punishing him for his actions, and everything just goes wrong, and it's hell on earth.
Yeah,
And it's
exactly.
incredible.
And a lot of points there. Well, first and foremost, I think all that you said is, I completely agree. All those reasons are reasons why the story is so fascinating, and it's so fascinating for, on a first point, because it's so seemingly so simple. I mean, some people would look at it and they wouldn't bat an eye of interest in looking at the film, because they think, oh, it's just family or whatever. It's just a guy, a king, a lord, giving his kingdom three ways, to his three sons. What's the deal here? Why should I care? But for me, it's exactly that. Despite the whole epic background landscape, it's the family dynamic, and there's brothers, there's sons, and there's jealousy. One is older than the other. How do you distribute things? I mean, the minute you have land, you have power. Power corrupts, and with power comes certain ways you want to be treated, certain ways you want to be addressed. And then people looking over the shoulders to what the other has this, I don't have it. There's always that power of comparison that kind of screws everything over, and you can find that in everyday life. You don't need to have, it doesn't need to be the story of a king and his land, so to speak. These dynamics of murky dynamics within a family, where there's love but also can be jealousy, and arguments happen in everyday life. And the war setting, the skirmishes, killing each other, it's just those arguments turned up to 11, essentially. And what's so and another second point, fascinating thing about it, is that yes, he's a horrible man. This is Lord Idetora, I think this is his first name. He has a lot of sins, and his sins come back to him in the story as he revisits these victims who are very much kind of integrated in his family. That was one of the most interesting aspects of the film for me, because you may have at one first level this idea of a king and his sons, Taro, Saburo, and Jiro, to whom he's giving the land, all the while he wants to keep the title of lord, not with the responsibility of managing the land, but still with the privileges of treatment. And that's, like you say, the problem. He still wants to have that, and that is creating friction with his sons. I mean, if you want to give us the power, then give it to us full. But what makes it extra interesting, and I wasn't expecting the first time around I was watching this, it's like when you see all this, you say, okay, so the story is about this. But then you have these secondary characters in the outskirts of the story that make it, well, this is intriguing. I was not expecting this. For example, you have Lady Kaede,
Kaede? I don't know. Yeah.
who is married to, difficult to pronounce, who is an extremely interesting character. Kind of this sort of femme fatale working in the shadows. It's a very strong feminine character who is married to Taro at the beginning of the film. Then she kind of once the Taro being the older son, once he dies, then she has an affair with the second brother, who is the one who gains ultimate power, who becomes the leading of the family once Taro dies. And so she's very much controlling things in the name of vengeance, because the king, the father of them all, killed her family, and she was integrated in his family as a wife to one of his sons. So that's very, very interesting thing to pick up. It could have been very well just a story of following this family falling apart, but you do have these characters in the outskirts who are a remembrance of his past, of relentlessness and taking land and killing everybody who was in his way, other lords that was in his way. So this lord, Ijimonji, or Hidentora, however you want to call him, the father, the king, really has to face up to those consequences, which is interesting. Later on, you have him at the lowest of his lows, when he re-meets with Saburo's, the youngest son, who was exiled because, like you said, he faces his father with the truth that you shouldn't do this. You shouldn't divide the kingdom in three parts, otherwise greed is going to appear. He's very honest in saying this, while the other sons just try to kiss his ass. The Lord, once he's at the lowest of the lowest and exiled from his lands, the sons don't want anything to do with him, to take every last bit of power from him. He re-meets with yet another victim of his past, who is the brother of one of his son's wives, who he blinded when he was a kid, in this little cottage. And the landscape, to that effect, really speaks louder than words, I think, because the way that Kurosawa, throughout his films, not just this one, manages to use the elements of nature, whether it's wind or water with rain, or smoke, haze, to emphasize this kind of human feeling uh, of longing, of sorrow, of desperation is amazing. I mean, the beginning of this film, like you said, how it lingers on just settling who these people are, who these characters are, before you even present them. First of all, you see the land, you see the landscape, and these soldiers over these hills. The way he takes advantage of foreground and background, depth of field, to create this sense of this never-ending land of greener grass is astonishing, you know. And and the music in this film is also very well used, because you have that kind of like, you know, that flute kind of thing, with the soldiers positioned at strategically positioned in these places in the shot that are like, you know, just watching over the land with this very eerie music, flute music, kind of wind like. Is very interesting because it creates this sense of suspense. What is going to happen in this land, to this land? Who owns it? You know, there's this feeling of possession right immediately, and it's very interesting. Meeting up that victim of his, the blind kind of brother of one of his son's daughters, is very interesting as well. It's very poignant. I think it's very violent when you see him just blinded, and he tells the story of how when he was a very young kid, he saw Lord Identore coming to his castle and killing his entire family, gouging his eyes. It's a very fine example of how a monologue can be very vivid in its details, and and how dialogue can be used in a cinematic way, I think. And on the last point, like you said, coming back to what was your first in your kind of opinion of the film, is that you have kind of some difficulties with war movies. Hey, you know, I have difficulties with desert movies, which is a very peculiar thing. But I get kind of sick, you know, watching movies placed in the
Like
desert,
what? Like Lawrence of Arabia?
Lawrence of, yes,
I've
like
never seen
part
it,
of me
so I
likes
don't
it.
know. Yeah.
Part of me, I've seen it twice because there's things in the movie that I really like, but at the same time, it can be a very daunting watch because
Yeah.
it's 3 hours.
Yeah.
And also, it's set in the desert. I really feel the desert, and I really get sick, like, like if I am, or watching, yeah, or for example, Afghan war movies or Iraq. I'm like, gee,
Yeah.
I watch Starhead, and I'm like, ugh, do like
Yeah,
watching the movie.
Don't do it for me.
I just get a kind of a headache. It's weird. It's weird, you know, how these kind of big set pieces films get the response from you. But you're the only other person who has this reaction for other reasons. Me is very kind of to do with the environment.
Yeah.
But yeah, like a little fun fact.
Lady Kaeda, as you were saying, is an amazing character. So manipulative, works her way around this family so well. But you also understand, like, she's clearly hurt and resents these people who destroyed her family and destroyed her. I don't even know, like, I assume she had like kingdom as well, or her father did. So what makes the film so interesting is that there's not really good or bad guys. It's just people who are destructive and they're destroying each other at all times. And that's sort of the conclusion by the end, when Saburo dies, almost a pointless, dumb death, just out of nowhere, and where everything was going to be resolved. And one of the characters says, "Why are the gods punishing us?" And the other mentions that we keep killing each other, we keep dying, we're always fighting for land and power, we can't just coexist, that's why we're being punished. And I think that's the conclusion that I think Kurosawa is getting at, more or less, with the whole context of the film, is that these people, you know, they could be enjoying the nature, which is so beautiful. It's just incredible environments that they're inhabiting, but they're more focused on killing each other and destroying the castles. And it's all very pointless, it feels. It's what's so fascinating about the film, that it's a war film, but it's not very at least for me, it's not a very exciting sort of battles. And I don't mean that negatively. I just that there's that big sequence at the midpoint, more or less. I think 1 hour in, where
Yeah.
there's just, you know, there's the music playing, all the fire burning, but most of the sound is cut. It's just the music, and it's very melancholic. It's not, you know, you're not watching like, whoa, my God, they're fighting, let's go. It's like,
Yeah.
it's just, why are we doing this? It's very sad in a way.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's right. To take up that scene. I mean, that scene is it's my absolute favorite in the
Yeah.
movie. I mean, just on aesthetically speaking, the way that he films in these wide shots, he can control crowds and the movement of thousands of people in
Hmm.
a way that I have rarely seen in other movies, where you see this swarm of armies in his films or crowds of people attacking each other, and how the camera follows them. It just feels like the people are part of nature as well, like a wave, you know. And in that moment when the castle is being attacked, the castle where the father kind of takes refuge, he's being attacked by the combined forces of his two eldest sons. It's interesting because, like you said, it's not the point is not enjoying the action from the perspective of an entertainment value, so to speak. It's more the emotion value that is at stake there. Because this man, this father to both his children, I think what makes the film so interesting in this kind of this greater background of historical background of war. The film manages through seeing the sins of this father, but also seeing the vulnerability of this father, and also apply to the sons, their vulnerability, their strengths, their sins. Is that you see both sides. You feel, you know, they're not one dimensional. You feel both. You empathize with them, but you also can see they are completely destructive and bad people. They have both things in them, and that makes it even more interesting. That scene where that I really want to talk about, where for a moment there's a whole sequence where finally the army is entering the main tower in the castle, and the concubines of the Lord are kind of killing themselves, and the music is roaring, this kind of violin, kind of chord music, and you see the arrows coming in through the windows, him desperate, kind of dodging the arrows, dodging the fire, and then the film absolutely takes advantage of moments of silence, and the way that he blocks the actors as they have dialogues and allows for silence to kick in. You can see kind of the thought process of the characters as they stop, move around, and to kind of fall down in solace, and they have these grunts and hums, and you kind of see a whole world through their eyes. And so in that castle, when he's alone and he finds that, you know, and he's finally coming down from his, you know, high and mighty throne to nothing, to becoming a beggar like Saburo, let's say, destitute of power, you really feel for him, because the reality is
Hmm.
he's an old man, becoming senile, becoming forgetful, forgetting everything that he has. In part because maybe his mind is aiding him to forget all those sins, and that's contradictory because, you know, you don't want him to forget his sins when he meets up with the blind boy, you know, the brother of one of his sons' wives that he blinded. You want him to remember it, but at the same time, somehow the very effect of him becoming senile makes you think that this is kind of his soul, his brain, his whole body trying to ease him into not remembering things, which I think poetically
Hmm.
is very interesting. You know,
Yeah.
he kind of falls into that forgetfulness because he wants to, not just by the very act of nature that you get old and you start forgetting things, to becoming senile and whatnot, but because he has all that baggage, all that load with him that he's trying to, you know, he's getting so much from all corners, his sons after him, that something is in him is trying to ease things up. And it's very sad because, you know, he's a frail old man, so you feel sorry for him
And there
for
are
that.
moments where he, especially after he goes crazy, like senile proper, there are still moments where he's like jolted back into reality, and he's like, especially when he's being confronted by the blind boy, or when he sees the castle and he mentions, oh, this is the castle I destroyed, and stuff like that. It's like,
Yeah.
he's, whatever, he did evil stuff, obviously, but you can't help but empathize with him, because again, as you were saying, he is very old, and at the same time he's showing just a little bit of remorse, and he's already being punished by the universe by all the wrong things that he did. So I do think that makes it a little easier for you as an audience to feel a little empathy for him, even if you're also being constantly reminded of the constant evil that he did, which is what makes the film so fascinating as well. so that it does not run away from that, from pointing the flaws and the evil of the character, while at the same time making you empathize with him. It's not easy to do at all. And I think, the tragic context, the fact that it all ends in more tragedy, makes it easier for you to connect with everyone, especially the old man, and I think Lady Kaeda. Especially her death is probably the most violent of all, with
Yeah,
just the
yeah,
blood splurting out everywhere. It's
yeah.
just it's an incredible
It's true.
visual, but it's also very
Uh-huh.
cruel. Again, she did bad stuff too. Obviously, she was killing people, getting Lady Sue killed, for example. But you still can't help but feel a little, bad for everyone. It's like, why are
Uh-huh.
we
Uh-huh.
doing this? It's very
Because they are, in a sense, they are bred from this violence, right? That's the kind of the world they know. So
exactly.
even if there's some good in them, and they all are, it's that thing, they are victims from each other, but also the victims become the abuser, the attacker.
Yeah.
So it's a cyclical thing, and I think it very much reflects, kind of, the world, the real world out of this narrative works with violence. That's that kind of old,
Yeah.
those old notions, those old stories. And it's very interesting to see Saburo's arc from that initial moment. He's the only son that kind of cuts the tree
Hmm.
and puts the tree next to his father once he kind of falls asleep at the beginning of the story. And I think that's a very beautiful gesture. And then he eventually comes back, and he's very genuine and he's very caring. And I was not expecting that, oddly, to turn that
Hmm.
way, because in the beginning, you really, in the beginning of the film, you really feel like he's the worst of them all. And then as the story unveils, you start to see the other way around. Oh no, they are the assholes. But they are all kind of that way. It's not just, a particular number of a particular someone. They all have their problems. I find the character of the Jester very interesting as well. It really, there's a side of this film that very much deals with theatricality, so to speak. There are various moments where, despite me not understanding Japanese, I understand that the acting choices at times,
Yeah,
maybe 70%, 80%, really take advantage of the theatricality of the original play. Although the original play wasn't originally the main inspiration for Kurosawa. He was actually inspired in the other side of what we just mentioned in our initial monologue for this episode, which was Japanese legends from that period in time, Shingoku, which is a period in Japanese history between like the 15th and 16th century, where a lot of upheaval and civil wars were happening between different warlords. So one warlord in particular, Monomatari, I'm not sure, probably not saying his name right, is the main inspiration for that. Then later on, during pre-production, he remembered King Lear and he integrated, and that was what helped. But you see, it's kind of, this also comes to the fact that there's a collective consciousness to how humans operate in the stories you like to tell. Like, he's thinking about that warlord from the 15th century, an actual real life figure. And meanwhile, King Lear in the West, kind of tells a similar story with different elements in it. But, it's like stories, events repeat in human history, and we kind of all do more or less the same mistakes and good examples. So that's interesting to think about. There's a theatricality in it that I find very intriguing. Doesn't hurt the movie. I think he really plays to this sort of epicness and this strange visage that is this whole landscape. Particularly when the father at the end, when Saburo finally finds him and wants to save him and protect him, he's in the middle of the desert next to some rocks, and like Lord Ichimonji is like, why are you taking me from my grave? Oh, and he starts digging the grave between the rocks. And I find that funny, but at the same time, very interesting. But it's like, only in Kurosawa would I find perhaps theatricality serious and fun at the same time. I don't know. It's like this world is so bizarre, and the music is so roaring and epic that you kind of buy into the whole declamation, statements said like this, because every gesture, every decision is this grand. So of course he's digging his own grave. So, you kind of believe it. If the atmosphere wasn't as well done, perhaps, if it was a more grounded tale of this story, perhaps I wouldn't believe in this sort of statement. But because I'm seeing this desolate land of rocks and dirt that just yesterday was greener grass, green grass. Yeah, it has a surreal effect to it. Kind of the landscape changes so often and so fast that you also believe how poignant, how over the top some of the statements may be. So yeah, I think the theatricality works in interesting ways. What do you think? Have you ever thought
Yeah,
about it throughout the film?
yeah, I did. It's very apparent, especially in the king Idetora, when the makeup that he has is a very
Yeah,
very
it kind
strange.
of
Yeah,
starts bending around his face really fast after that point of no return when his castle is burned. Beautiful shots of him coming down the stairs of the castle, burning, and the army below. His composition is amazing. In
yeah,
how he
he's
organizes everything by thirds, whether horizontally or vertically, and he leaves also space to breathe in. On another level, the composition in Mikey and Nikki is very
yeah
different
different
in terms of
completely.
organizing, not organized at all. But that is what makes it interesting as well, I must say. Completely different style.
Yeah, I think with Kurosawa, you were talking about what makes also the theatricality more acceptable or makes it work. I think the fact that it's so composed in such purposeful ways also helps that you. It's not just that the actors are theatrical. It's the shots themselves are
Yeah,
framed
true.
and composed in a way that it's clearly, it's rehearsed. It's done in a very purposeful way. It didn't happen by chance. The way they're every like every soldier is on the frame in certain moments, especially in the static shots where they're just standing. It's like it's so perfect. It's completely. He has such a perfect eye to, in not just to frame, but like insert the people in the landscape. It's
Yeah.
incredible. And then you add the elements around it, a burning fire or the wind. It's incredible. I also love in the beginning when he cuts to those shots in the to the clouds. I think
Ah,
just gives
yeah.
it
Oh,
such
there's a
a,
beautiful shot of a
yeah,
cloud going.
a biblical feeling. Yeah,
No.
it's
Yeah,
so
amazing.
incredible. Yeah,
And I don't know how he catches this stuff on film, which is running like wild, and you will soon not have film.
yeah,
And
exactly.
how you catch these perfect shots? It's like they were trained at the time. I think digital, in a way, if it has its benefits, at the same time it spoiled us because at the time somehow, maybe it's me romanticizing it, but I do believe, like Herzog says, that it trained you to kind of, you had that amount of film, it cost a lot, and you made it work to catch the shots that you really wanted. So there's something to be said for
Every
that.
shot mattered.
Yeah,
Now
exactly.
it's, it's that thing. It has benefits and negatives, but it does feel a bit sometimes that there's not as much attention to the image because it's so easy to just let the camera run, or it's just like, oh, we'll film that, we'll film that, we'll film that, and then we'll see. So you lose a bit of that, the mystique of the image itself that's captured on film. That's
Yeah,
very limited, and you need to know what you want. It's and it's a different psychology to it all. And again, like there's incredible films made on digital. It's not,
oh
it
yeah,
hasn't killed
definitely.
cinema, but
I
it's
mean,
different.
yeah, it's just another it's another
Yeah,
mode of operating,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
And I mentioned Herzog because I've revisited a moment in an interview where I've seen him before, because he was talking about coverage, and that led him to discuss this, how
Hmm.
today's filmmakers don't really concern themselves with the image and capturing whole. They, they don't know what they're doing. They don't know. I ran a film school, so I know that they're misusing it. So I tell my students, please know what you're doing. Yeah, well, it's a bit harsh, but it's true because, coverage. I don't think of coverage. I don't think in the sense of, you need to have a master shot and then a shot, reverse shot. You shoot what you need to shoot, and for the purpose of the language, the approach you're trying to get,
Yeah.
which is a very American thing. He said this because when he was filming a film that we reviewed before, Bad Lieutenant, the producers were coming on his ass saying, "Why don't you shoot coverage? Why don't you shoot coverage?" And Nicolas Cage stopped the production and said, "Listen, this is one of the best directors I've worked with because he knows what he's doing. And that is very much in respect to knowing the shots. I don't need coverage because I know, I'm not saying I specifically, I'm saying I has like a general subject, like has a director. I know what I want. So Kurosawa knows what he wants. He doesn't need to do shot reverse shots. Or
yeah, coverage is very.
It's a very American thing. Very.
But interesting. I read that Kurosawa used 3 cameras sometimes, like at the same time, which is not something that I would thought. I guess it's that's why it had a big budget, because that's not an easy thing to do. It also speaks to how organized and how well composed these images were, that he felt comfortable doing that, and also he had been doing it for a long time as a director. It's probably
definitely. This is 1980, so yeah, it's a long time. It was about his maybe 3rd adaptation of something of Shakespeare, like The Throne of Blood before, so a lot. Also another adaptation that kind of was inspired in Hamlet. He did a lot, and I've seen a lot of his films previously. Kagemusha, for example, was my first, was just before STC. There's Urzala, I think. I don't know which one. Maybe that one was my first. And I love that. I love it. It was his first foreign film, so to speak.
Yeah, it was in Russia or something like that.
Russia, very specific. And it's just an amazing, amazing film. I need to revisit it. I think I saw it in RTP Memoria, So that's fun. It's one of those films that you accidentally stumble upon at night, and then you watch it, and I was like, wow, amazing. Because it's about this kind of wilderness man that a bunch of kind of a Russian team that does mappings of regions, finds in the middle of nowhere. And it's a real story of this man, kind of a mountaineer away from society, and how they try to bring him back to society. He kind of gets used to the idea, says yes, but then he can't handle it and comes back. And I think it's a very sweet story about the connection between man and nature, and very kind of one of the least talked about, I think, movies of his. But then he has other amazing films, like AKIRA is an amazing film. Like the remake, it's not one of the worst remakes, but it's not, I mean, it's like the original is so much better. Like the remake is okay, but it's like I'm looking at it and I'm thinking I'd much rather be watching the first one than this. To just change the setting, great music, good actors, fine, but it's not something that Again, the shots in AKIRA cannot be compared with the shots in Living because they are amazingly masterful. And one of them, there's a shot from The Old Man. If you kind of know the story more or less, it's about this old man who is regretful of not having taken advantage of life more. He's kind of this clerk in an office, punching people down who go to the city hall and ask for stuff in the city to be solved for them. He says, okay, we'll take care of it, but then he doesn't. So he wants to do something with his life once he has cancer. And it's one of those stories that, you've seen this before in one of the most, popular films in Hollywood. But this is one that is done, like we said, stories are told countless times in different ways. This is a version of that story of the old man who wants to give one last try at life, done in a very sensitive, contained, and great way. It's such a great, great film. I really would like you to watch it and tell me what you think, because I find it amazing. And there's one shot in particular of him at his house. Like, I don't remember exactly what situation is, but I remember him being on the stairs, and he's like on all fours on the stairs of his house. I'm not sure if he fell or if he's listening to his son kind of talking with his wife in one of the rooms, and he's acting all dodgy just to not be seen. Don't remember quite what is the context, but I just love the shot. I remember to this day, like on top of the stairs and him just there all frail, lying on the stairs. And I use that shot in one of my short films, Away in Silence. So he definitely is a great inspiration. And yeah, saw a bunch of his films. Still need to watch a bunch more that I want to check out. Yeah. What were some films that you saw from him?
I only Ran and Drunken Angel. Only those two. Right. Yeah. It's still a big blind spot.
True. Well, I would advise AKIRA as a head start. Is a very good one. Seven Samurai. I mean, come on, you need to watch Seven Samurai.
See, those are Seven Samurai is more difficult for me.
True. You don't like.
I feel like I'm more into like the
Action
crime
stuff, war
films,
stuff.
the
Crime
Bats
films,
Sleep
right,
Well, and
Right, yes.
Stray
High and
Dogs.
Low. I think High and Low
High
you
and Low,
probably
yeah,
like.
I have to watch
Yeah,
those.
I haven't seen that one actually.
Yeah, I have a bunch of his films on Plex on the server.
Cool.
I still haven't
That's nice.
gotten around to it.
Yeah.
And that's all for today. If you'd like to reach out and suggest a film for the next episode, you can find us on the podcast official Instagram and Facebook pages. Feel free to subscribe, share this episode, or simply give us a little like. That's how our podcast can grow ever more groovy. And if you're on YouTube and want to see more videos like this, check out this next video right here. Thanks for listening and see you next time. Bye-bye!